Larsson. Oh, he's in! Henrik Larsson! That is sensational! O'Reilly, how about that for a pass? Jota! How about that for a finish? That is Jota for you! In for Henrik Larsson, and Moravcik! His first goal for Celtic! Here is Shunsuke Nakamura! Exquisite!
Hello and welcome back to the Celtic Unrestricted View. My name is Ryan Clifford and joining me on this guest episode, the first guest episode of the season, is Alan Stirling. And joining us is our good man Dan Orlowitz, sports journalist from Japan. Dan has been on before, giving us all the information on the lowdown from Japan. Had a good episode when Maeda and Hitati and Kyogo signed from Dan, which was really interesting, really information knowledge-wise. And we really enjoyed it. So he is back on with us and he's gladly accepted the invitation. So Dan, thanks for coming on and having a wee chat with us today. And I hope you're well as well, mate.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be back. It's been, a couple of years now since, I guess it was Maeda, Hatate, and Itaguchi was that third signing, which we keep forgetting.
Yeah.
That he was the third in that trio. No, it's good to be back. It's great to see more Japanese players join Celtic, which I think the fans and the club have treated Japanese players so well, and over the last 4 or 5 years, we've seen the relationship redevelop between Celtic and Japanese football, and it's been great to see. So I'm always happy to talk about it and come on, and I love chatting with you guys. So it's great to be on.
Oh, fantastic, Dan. That's nice to hear. At least somebody likes talking to us, Alan, so we're all right that way, mate.
Yeah. I know. Oh, it's great to have Dan on. Obviously, we're more concentrated on kind of European football, mostly kind of British football and primarily Scottish football. So when we're linked or kind of sign players for whether it be kind of Asia or specifically Japan, we don't know a kind of great deal. We could look at the evidence available, maybe their statistics, their kind of pedigree, profile, etc. But it's always great to have somebody on like Dan that's living that side of the world, that's living watching that kind of football, and to find out a bit more what we can expect for the players that we've recently brought in. So yeah, looking forward to hearing some of Dan's knowledge about these players. Yeah, should be good. Thanks for coming on.
Also, Dan, let's just fire away. Obviously, the most recent one is Yamada, the striker. I think it's 1.5, 1.7. You might know more in terms of that side of it. But when the first came about he was signing, I think you mentioned it was last year or January, but was that public knowledge back then that this was maybe going to happen when it did happen, or was it maybe something in January that might have been the case?
After he had an amazing 2024 season, and I think there was a lot of buzz, and there was, I think you look at the trend, and especially with Japan on the verge of qualifying for the World Cup, you have a lot of players who are looking for a path to Europe and a way to get the attention of Hajime Moriyasu. So in that sense, I think that Yamada, he did fantastically for Frontale numbers wise. You see a lot of goals. You think he's doing well, and so there was a lot of buzz around him. And yes, the Celtic links, and it didn't happen. And he hasn't put up the same numbers this season, and we'll get into that. And there are reasons for that. Let's put that out there. But things came together very quickly. From what I've heard, the conversations had sort of happened and then tailed off a bit, and then over the summer there was another just a rise in interest, and they got it over the finish line. I think maybe, I don't want to speculate, but maybe Celtic saw Kota Takai and that move that was happening, and they think, well, we don't want to get left at the altar. The fact that Frontale have in the same window sent two of their starters, two of their most anticipated players to Europe and to huge clubs. It speaks of course that speaks really well of Frontale's youth development and all the effort they've put into. So I think they're at 7 or 8 Japan internationals in the last 8 or 9 years that they've sent to Europe. That's probably the best hitting rate in Japan as far as that's concerned.
Obviously, as Dan says there, Alan, in terms of that signing, they get done pretty quickly, which is pretty good in terms of us to know, because I don't know if you know, Dan, but sometimes Celtic can be quite slow in getting deals done. So for me, Alan, like Dan says, the fact we'll get this done pretty quickly in the window, considering it could have been the last week or two of the window, that's good for us to know that that's it done quickly. And as we'll get on the episode as we go, Alan, that there could be good signs from Yamada.
Dan might not know, but Celtic tend to kind of drag their feet with transfers, drag their feet more than a man heading to death row. I think that we're widely known for that recently, so it is relatively frustrating, but obviously there's a couple of players come in just now. Ryan spoke about kind of Yamada. We've looked at his kind of his profile. We looked and seen that the season before this one that he scored quite an impressive amount of goals, but then, as you touched upon, wasn't quite as impressive this year. You mentioned about the reasons. What would you think the reasons behind that is, and what type of player should the Celtic fans expect? I know that we have kind of, it's maybe different for the likes of Kyogo that we've seen in the past. I think maybe it's just natural with being Japanese that a lot of Celtic fans maybe will have a comparison, but maybe different players. But in terms of kind of the impact that you could see Yamada having, could it be similar to the likes of Kyogo? What's your opinion on that matter, Dan?
So I was actually last week. I had a great chat with Takashi Eto, who's one of the top Kawasaki beat writers, and he's sort of my go-to guy whenever I have specific questions about the club. And we were talking about Takai mainly, but of course we talked about Yamada, since that transfer was just about to go through. And he was of the opinion that, yes, Yamada is sort of the in-the-box finisher, and in that sense, very similar to Kyogo and how he played at Celtic. I think Kyogo was, if you set him up with the ball in the final third, he'll do something with it and very likely score. In terms of physicality, in terms of work rate, Yamada sort of does have a lot of similarities to Maeda. And I'm not going to, I wouldn't promise, I'm not going to say that Yamada is sort of a one-to-one for Kyogo or a one-to-one for Maeda, but he does check enough boxes that you can see. For example, I know that there's been a lot of speculation over Maeda getting attention from Premier League clubs. I think West Ham are interested. We don't know how that's going to turn out. I know nothing. I'm not going to get into that. But if Maeda was to leave, I think that Yamada is a very interesting candidate, to fill that role. Not necessarily the same box to box play. And I'll get into the question that JP Boy asked, which is about the form. To understand Yamada's numbers, Frontale changed managers over the winter. So Toru Oniki, who masterminded their dynasty from 2017 to last season, was out, and Shigetoshi Hasebe, who did really well at Avispa Fukuoka over these last few seasons, was in. So Hasebe is much more of a defensive-minded manager. And Frontale have not always been a defensive-minded team. They've consistently had one of the best attacks in the league. And they sort of thrive on possession, not just possession, but also just using their speed and using their passing sense to just flood the box and create stuff out of chaos in a way. And Yamada really thrived on that chaos, especially last season, which is why he scored so many goals. And they've been more organized this year, which has benefited the team's results. But at the same time, they just haven't been creating the kind of chances that he used to score a lot from last season. So, on the other hand, he has been contributing a lot more on the defensive side of things, which was a big weakness for him. So, I think that he understands. When you're playing for Celtic, when you're playing in Scotland, you're going to have to contribute more to the defense, especially with some of those tougher games. It's I hesitate to get too into it, but the real competition, the games that are going to be tough for Celtic, you do have to contribute defensively, and so I think that he'll be better prepared for that. Still an unfinished product defensively, but I think with the right guidance and the right coaching and an integration into the first team, I think that there's a lot of potential there.
Just on obviously JP, who is part of the podcast. Hope you're well, JP. He asked Dan, does Yamada's form this term, has that been due to Celtic's interest, and do you think that's been him wanting to move sooner?
I'm not gonna I don't want to speculate there. I think that everyone. I was talking to someone who pointed out, 90. It's not just that interest from Celtic or interest in moving overseas. At this point, 90% of J League players want to go overseas, at least in the J1. If you're in the top flight, I think that you have that dream of going further. And it's not a pipe dream anymore. It's not like when Ono and Nakata and Nakamura were going over, and it was novel. It was different. It was special. Like, I think that there is an expectation that if you have ambition, you're going to go overseas. And I think of players in the past who have sort of had that expectation and collapsed under the weight of it. And Yoichiro Kakitani from about a decade ago, it really comes to mind. He was with Cerezo Osaka, had some breakout season, struggled in 2014, went to the World Cup, went to Switzerland, and flopped out. It was just, came back kind of tail between his legs, that sort of thing. And I don't see that in Yamada. Like, he's just sort of low profile, kind of milquetoast. There's not as much of a personality there as you've gotten with Maida, for example. But I think that he's got the grind set that a lot of Frontale players have. Their academy just produces hit after hit, and so a lot's going to depend on how well he integrates into the team, how well he integrates into living over there, and his English ability and that sort of thing. But I think that he's got great mentors in the Japanese players who were there. He's got, he talked to Inamura ahead of the move, and that was one of the factors in convincing himself to take the deal. And I think there's a lot there. I'm not gonna, I think you may remember when Maida and Hatate went over, I told you were getting you were getting winners.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to promise the sun, moon, and the stars for Yamada and Inamura, because they're young and they're still getting there. But I think there's a lot of upside, and I think that these are great pickups for the club.
Obviously, Alan, as Dan mentioned there, he did give us quite a good write-up chat on Hatate Maeda, especially. I think it's Maeda, actually. It was quite a glowing report, actually. Hopefully, Alan, this is the case. I know Dan's not going to give us the kiss of death and say they're going to be brilliant and they're not very good, but I think overall, Alan, it's good to hear a wee bit of positivity on the Yamada signing, because we don't really know about him, like you say, Alan, in the start of the show. We don't know much about him. We can only go on his goal scoring record or what he's done this season, but obviously there's his potential. As Dan mentioned, he's doing more defensive work in the team, and that's obviously maybe not helped his goal scoring. So that's quite positive, Alan, that maybe if he does get back into the attacking side of the football game at Celtic, that'll help us and get him scoring goals.
Yeah, no, definitely. Obviously, we don't know that league properly, so we can only look at the figures in front of us. And obviously, we've seen that he had a great season, kind of the year previous, but this season, Dan's explained that, and kind of good depth there. That could have been the issue with the change of management, the change of style, change of tactics, etc. So we can trust upon that. We're looking as well. We are probably thinking that Celtic need a new kind of number one striker. A lot of the fan base are thinking that we need a new number one striker. I know you know what, you're kind of sitting in the fence stance slightly, but and you're not going to say he's going to be maybe as good as Hatate and Maeda, but do you think he's maybe got the potential? Has he got, from what you've seen, has he got the potential to be kind of somewhere in Europe as their kind of number one striker with the likes of Celtic? Has he got the potential to step up to that level for what you've seen?
I do think that he can step up. I think that, look, you're looking at the Japanese strikers that you've had in the last couple of years, the Japanese attackers. I mean, Maeda and Kyogo were just so good. And, those are big shoes to fill. But at the same time, Yamada, I think he proved last season that, you give him the ball and you put him in position and he'll score goals. And that is something that Celtic are very, very, very good at. So in that sense, I'm not super concerned with the team's ability to help put him in a position to score goals. I do think that it's just making sure that he's adjusting well. JP brings up Sato-san, the Japanese interpreter, and I think that's another example of how Celtic have been really smart about how they're working with Japanese players, because not every European club provides that interpreter full time. Really? Some clubs will they might have the interpreter on for the first season or maybe the first 6 months, but it didn't used to be as common. And
is that like a full-time job or employed by Celtic then, Dan? Yeah.
I believe I don't have a personal relationship with him, so I don't know how his contract is set up. I believe it's full time. And in Japan, when foreign players come over here, the clubs have full time interpreters. Several of them: Portuguese, English, Korean, whatever's needed. Spanish. There's so many Portuguese interpreters in the J League, and usually they're doing double duty. So if you have an English-speaking player and a Portuguese-speaking Brazilian, they'll handle both, and that helps the players so much, not just on the pitch but off the pitch. Helping them figure out where to buy groceries, helping them learn how to use the laundry machine. Like, these are little quality of life things that, the less you have to worry about that, the more you can focus on the game.
Yeah.
And I think that Celtic have been very smart in that they're doing that, and not just for one player, but in having interpreters. I believe they have two, or they had two at some point. They are able to support multiple players. They can all get settled. They can all adjust to things. I'm sure that they're getting support for learning English or continuing in their learning process, whatever it is, and just living there, they will integrate. So I do, I applaud that. I think that it's, with some players you do need to, I hesitate to say hold their hands, but you do need to offer them support, and other players just adjust. Kaoru Mitoma at Brighton, I think he spoke great English before he went over, and he was able to adjust pretty quickly. But not all players can do that, so I think there is, clubs have to be sensitive to that if they're signing Japanese players, and they have to understand how to put those players in the best circumstance to succeed.
It just shows a bit of care and maybe attention on behalf of the club. I think that whether it be the Asian Japanese players that are coming in, they maybe feel more kind of at home and more support they're having that kind of option that the club's provided and a translator. It just means that the players are seeing that Celtic have put that extra effort in to just, try and provide their kind of transition a little easier, shall we say. So for me, when you've got a happy player, you're obviously going to have maybe a more productive player. And yeah, I think JP is right that it's definitely a good thing having a full-time translator there, and it kind of helps ease the transition for players coming over for Japan.
Obviously, as well, Dan, in terms of the player itself, apparently, according to stats and data, he's fast or he's quicker than Maeda. So that might be something Celtic might use, because they use Maeda pretty well in certain games, especially in Scotland, because some players that aren't as quick as Celtic players are maybe not sharp, and especially at Celtic Park, we get a lot of joy out of it. And even last year when we go to Ibrox, you've got maybe like James Tavernier and maybe John Souttar Rangers. They aren't very quick, and Celtic use that as an ally against them. Is that something that Yamada would potentially, if he maybe not the same quality as Maeda, but that side of it as a physical, strong, powerful, would he kind of slip into the way Celtic want to play?
Yeah, I think that you see him play, and the speed is, as you say, it's remarkable. And I think that Maeda is sort of the gold standard for speed, as far as especially at the national team level. And Yamada has that potential. I think that if anything, it's and you get back to that question of development, and that's something I talked about, where Yamada is a relatively new player in the J League. He's only been at Frontale for a couple of seasons because he came out of university. And compared to Kota Takai, who went to Spurs at the age of 20, that's sort of another shift we're going to see. And so the question is for Yamada, just physically, how much can he push himself further? I think that being able to keep up the speed, like Maeda could run end to end for 90 minutes and still run a marathon afterwards. And you couldn't beat that. And I'm not 100% sure. I don't think that Yamada will be able to match that for a bit, but I think that as he gets used to things, as he builds up his endurance and adjusts his work rate to the needs of the club, he's just blindingly fast when he's on his peak, and I think he'll be able to show you some really good runs this season.
What's your thoughts on that, Alan? Obviously, if somebody's quicker or as quick as Maeda, that's pretty alarming, I would say, for the rest of Scottish football, because to have that speed in your team, I've always said, Alan, that you might not be the best of players, but if you're sharp and really, really quick, defenders don't like pace, Alan. So that's another thing that we could use. I don't know, we'll touch on it as well, but I don't know if he can play out wide. But the fact that he can have that pace, Alan, going behind defenders, especially at Celtic Park, that's a really good thing to have for us, I think, in our armour, Alan.
Yeah, obviously pace in this country is very important. It can cause teams a lot of troubles, but you obviously need that bit of technical ability and that quality to go with the pace. I think over the last kind of year, 18 months, I think you've seen a change in kind of Daizen Maeda. I think you see his conversion rate with his goals last year. I think working with Brendan is maybe, whereas the only thing we maybe had an issue with Daizen Maeda in his first season or two was sometimes his finishing, he was putting the ball out the stadium, etc. His finishing wasn't ideal, but he stepped it up massively the last year or 18 months. So I think the quality levels are definitely there. Let's hope he's as quick as Maeda, maybe not as much as Dan says, but I think Maeda's biggest asset isn't maybe his pace, it's the intensity of pace that, as Dan says, he just doesn't stop. But it doesn't matter. He chases kind of lost ball after lost ball. He just puts pressure onto the opposition. So, yeah, it's exciting to see. I hope maybe we play. We've got a couple of friendlies during the week. It's Wednesday and Saturday, isn't it?
Thursday, and then I think if we win that, I think the winner plays a team at the weekend.
and the runners-up play each other as well. So we all have 2 games. So let's hope that Yamada, I don't know if Dan could tell us if he's ready to rock and roll, if he's fit. I take it the Japanese season's still going there, so I wouldn't see any reason why you wouldn't be up to match fitness. So let's see. Let's hope we get to see Yamada a bit, and then we can judge how he gets on with his new teammates and in these friendlies, hopefully.
Yeah, so we are right in the middle of the season. I think he played his last game not this past or a couple weekends ago. He should be fine, honestly. I mean, you look at how quickly Inamura was playing in friendlies and getting stuck in. So I think that he should be able to get on the pitch hopefully soon, and I would imagine he'll be ready for the start of the season. And I think someone asked if Hatate had been through the same system. Yes, Hatate, another Kawasaki alum, actually. Yamada went to the same university as Miki Yamane, who was another Kawasaki player, represented Japan at the World Cup in 2022, and now he's playing for LA Galaxy in MLS. So, again, it's just Kawasaki's academy does not miss. And I'm seeing in the comments, speculation, I guess, asking about Maeda and that sort of thing. Again, it's sort of hard to tell. He's obviously, I think Maeda's doing fantastically. I think that he's become just this cult hero in all the ways we'd hoped he would be, and just a regular hero, just an amazing player for the club. And so, you'd like to hope that whatever decision he's making is the best for him and the best for the family and all that. I think that's the most important thing. But I don't worry about Maeda. I think he's a smart player. He's going to make smart decisions for him, and we'll see how that goes.
Another question from, it was P. McLaughlin, Dan. He says, do you think that if Yamada comes here and does well, he'll get a call up pretty quickly to the Japan national team?
I do. Well, quickly is a relative term, but I think that you look at, he played well in his somewhat limited time at the East Asian, or the EAFF E1 Championship, which is basically the East Asian Cup. They have a couple weird names for it, but he's, we're so wide open ahead of this World Cup. We qualified in March. So Japan has had, I think there's a record amount of time for Japan to figure out what its team is going to look like. And hey, he comes out strong early, from August, September, maybe even gets, some Champions League time and looks good on it. You never know. I think that there's every player who is on the bubble or who's in the national team picture, and they've all got a chance. I've talked to other media, and I've said if you were to announce Japan squad tomorrow, Yamada isn't on the plane.
Mm-hmm.
He's just way too far down in the depth chart right now. But a season's a long time. He's got till May to prove himself, and so it's all up to him now.
And last bit about Yamada, then we'll touch on Anamura. Dan, what do you think of your expectation, and what's the main thing that Celtic fans should kind of look forward to on Yamada?
I think that he's, it's his physicality. I think he's, not the, he's not the biggest player, but he's well built, and he'll be able to take on challenges, and he won't be afraid. He won't be afraid of whatever's facing him on the other side of the ball. And I think that has been that was a bit of an adjustment for the other Japanese players, coming to Celtic and experiencing the way that teams defend against them. So, I think that he'll be fine in that respect. I think he's going to put his head down and work hard, and he's going to do his best to win the fans' respect, and in the only way he knows how, which is scoring goals. So I think that there's a lot to look forward to. He's not, like I said, he's not going to be the flashiest of players off the pitch, but he'll get it. He gets it done on the pitch, and that's what counts.
I think as long as he scores goals, Alan, that'll be the main thing for us, and that's all we want, to score goals and perform on the park. But obviously, Alan, Anamura has just come in as well. Daniel obviously touched on more if he's a centre-back or left-back, but he's been playing the left-back at the moment, understudy to Kieran Tierney as it looks at the moment. But for me, Alan, we'll touch on obviously about the Japanese side thinking what they thought of the move, but I think as a fan base, majority as well, like, oh, this is a strange one. Pretty cheap signing. Some people say that he wasn't maybe cut out for it at the moment. Maybe it's a too far a move at the moment, but he's done okay the last 2 friendly games. But we will see as it goes on, Alan, defending better in the league, see how he goes and maybe the Champions League if he plays. But are you a bit better than the signing now, Alan, or you want to see what Dan says and then obviously see how he progresses in the season, Alan?
Obviously, what Dan says is important, but before we speak to Dan, obviously we can only look at the profiles, as we said. We can only look at the evidence that we're provided with. And I'm sorry to say, before Inamura come in, the evidence wasn't exactly promising, but I look at Dan will know a lot more, obviously, but we looked at it. Wasn't a lot of games he played. Obviously, a young player. The team that he plays for, I don't want to try and pronounce. I'll leave that to Dan as well. They're kind of floating about the relegation zone. The last game he played, I think it was 4-0. That team get beat, and if you're looking at, we thought he was a centre half. If your teams get beat kind of 4-0 in his last game, it was slightly concerning. I think you look as well the relatively small value. With 250 grand, usually you get what you pay for. That's been wrong with the likes of kind of Daisen Maeda and Real Hitati that's turned out to be fantastic players. He's played now a couple of pre-season games for us. Anamura at left back, as Ryan said, he has looked relatively decent as backup. But myself and Ryan spoke about this earlier, that I think with any player, you need to judge them over a prolonged period of time. I think it was our man, JP, for the podcast, I think it was last year, that Kwon come in. And I think after the first game, he thought
I said it as well.
So I think that Celtic fans, right, his first couple of games are friendlies, but we need to step back, right? These guys, these friendlies, Newcastle, Sporting Lisbon, they've been playing 2 weeks less than us in regards to fitness. They are nowhere near where they would be if, say, we come up against them at Champions League level. So we just need to kind of step back, be a bit sensible. He could be a great player, Anamura, but let's judge him over a good few games. Let's see what kind of levels he can achieve. It's not a big risk signing because of the little value the little kind of transfer fee that we've paid. So hopefully he does succeed. The start looks very promising, but as I say, I like to kind of hold back and judge over a prolonged period of time before you can make that proper full judgment for me.
Yeah, I think you're probably right, Alan. I think it's got to be a long period of time. But was it a surprise, Dan, when it came in the media? Because we didn't know about it until just a bit before he signed, a few days before it. Is it a bargain? Could it be a bargain, Dan? Is it going to be one where we might need to wait a while till it comes good? Or is it a centre-back, left-back? What's your take on Anamura, Dan? And were you surprised personally as well that he came to Celtic? Or do you think it's actually a smart move?
I definitely think that he's a player. You look at his potential, his performances so far. Obviously, again, first-year rookie. He played for Albirex Niigata. Alan is the name of the club. So he played for them as the term is sort of special designation player, which allowed him to play for Niigata last season while still keeping his academic eligibility. So he could also play for his university team, which is a system that the Japan Football Association has in place. Trust the process. I think I know that it can be a 4-letter word among Celtic fans. Patience. I would be Not that I think he's a poor player. I am also very curious to see how he develops. I think that he does need time. I think that I like that he's getting stuck in these early friendlies and contributing and impressing Brendan Rodgers. I think it shows his potential, but preseason friendlies versus in-season games that count are obviously two different things. So I think that he can develop. I think there's a ton of upside. I think he's got all the tools to be a great defender. You just have to wait for them to emerge and wait for them to develop. I understand, bad teams can have great defenders and great players. And I think that's, Niigata have one of the smallest budgets in the top flight. That 4-0 loss was against Machida Zelvia, who are, owned by a media company, Cyber Agent, one of the biggest digital media companies in Japan. They've invested a ton of money into that club in the last few years, finished third last season. They have money, Albirex does not. So, I'm obviously I can't go on every Celtic podcast and talk and explain these circumstances. I'm not gonna say that they're secretly a good team. No, they're not. They're dead. They're last, and they're let's face it, probably getting relegated. But I think that he has the potential to do very well. Defenders are often an unheralded position at Celtic, where you want your strikers scoring at will, and as long as they can do that, things are probably going to work out. But I think that he's definitely a bright young star. I think that you're looking at Japan is looking at a generational transition coming up on the back line, and I think that he's definitely going to be in the picture. Probably again, I think Yamada has a chance of getting on the plane. I don't think Inamura has a chance of getting on the plane for this World Cup. But if you're looking ahead to 2030, yes, things start to look pretty good. So I think he's a player with a lot of long-term potential. You're just this first season is going to be kind of like Iwata in a way, sort of looking and seeing how he develops and how he gets used to things.
In terms of his position, Dan, there was rumours that he was a centre back, but with Celtic at the moment he's been playing left back. Does it really matter where he plays, or is he quite comfortable in both, or does he have a set position where he's better in?
It's the same at Niigata. He was sort of center back, but he could also play on the left as needed. So I think that is where he's comfortable. And if you look at his passing charts, a lot of his activity is coming on the left side anyway. So I think that if they want to switch him to be a left back, I think he's got the potential there to make that transition.
Pretty interesting that, Alan, that we can maybe look at the two sides position sense in terms of centre back and left back. Will Anamura be the left back cover for Kieran Tierney, and it means you just need to then go and get a centre back? Who knows? But what's your take on Anamura now, Alan? Are you a bit more positive that it might actually be a bargain, basically, maybe?
Yeah, it started well. There's no doubt about that. He's played reasonably well. He's played probably better than I thought. But as I say, these are friendlies. I'm not reading too much into these. I think that we just need to kind of patience, probably the key. Just wait and see how he gets on, how he kind of progresses. And when you're speaking about he can kind of play both positions, I think Celtic might have just been lucky with a few of the Japanese players that were brought in, but we've seen Ryo Hayato play right back. It seems to be there's a bit of flexibility in regards to kind of positioning. We've seen kind of Daisen Maeda play obviously up front and off of both wings. You've seen Kyogo playing off the wing as well. I think that's predominantly where he played previously. I think he's played in that position as well. So, and I think Iwata kind of he moved about a bit as well. He was looked at. I think did he not play centre half defence in one game? I'm pretty sure. So there seems to be a bit of flexibility regarding positioning with the players that we've brought in for Japan. Whether that's just been our luck or it's a kind of it's a cultural thing where these players are maybe kind of trained and taught to play different positions, etc. So yeah, it's always good to have that wee bit of cover on a couple of positions. It has looked pretty decent at present. I'll withhold judgment just now. I think that we can all say that he's looked promising, but sometimes we know that promise doesn't always turn out the way we thought. So if he's still playing in this manner and playing this regularly in the next kind of 6 months or so, then we can all go, yeah, right, we've got a bargain, we've got a player in our hands. But we all know how quickly football can turn, how quickly that people's fortunes can turn. So yeah, I think it's just one of the ones for me personally. Take a step back and just let's see how the young guy progresses. If he does come on to kind of be a good asset for Celtic, absolutely fantastic. But let's just we don't want to kind of put too much pressure on him at present because he is a young boy. He's just coming into a new country, a new culture, new football club, much bigger football club, by the way. So there'll be a lot of adjustments for him. So just we'll kind of hang fire and let's see how it progresses for me.
Last wee bit, Dan, a question from Brown Warrior. He says he would love to know what you think of Kyogo's decision to leave Celtic, go to Rennes in a relegation battle, and then obviously now he's in Birmingham. What's your take on that, Dan? And is it a bit of a surprise in Japan as well?
It's tough. I think that we all understand that Celtic, in terms of being a great club in a league that does not have quite the depth of other European leagues. Let's be honest. Even with this new Champions League format, you're expanding the number of sort of games against really tough competition that you have by 2, 3, 4 games a season. So in that sense, I can understand his desire to want to play in what he may perceive for whatever reasons. Again, this isn't my personal opinion. I don't want you guys parent slamming into my DMs, but the players want to be able to test themselves in as tough a league as they can get into, and I understand being able to go against clubs like PSG and Marseille and all that. I can understand the appeal there, but is it working for him? I don't know. I think that as far as the national team goes, I think that everyone understood he didn't really have a way forward with the national team. And that's not a comment on him as a player for his club, but just how he played for Celtic was not a good fit for how he played, how he was used for Japan, and how Japan was playing. So I don't, it's unfortunate that it worked out how it did. I would have much rather preferred that Japan play the style of football that supports Kyogo. Yeah. I said this around the time of the World Cup, and even we're starting to kind of get there in a way. You look at how Japan played 3-4 years ago versus how they're playing now, and the attack is just a joy to watch. And we're starting to get there. That we, instead of seeing the rope-a-dope that we saw against Spain and Germany, we may see some really exciting stuff from Japan. From the first minute in the States or Canada or wherever they end up playing. So. I think that the players are always going to go for what they think is the best decision. It sometimes doesn't work out for them, and that's just sort of how it is. I'll be very curious to see how he gets on, because also he's 30 at this point, 31. Yeah. And I think at that age, there may be a part, you chase the bag, you get the financial security for the kids that you've had at that point, and I think that. Getting to Birmingham City, and he's now in the Championship, and that's should he be playing in the Premier League? Probably, if we're being honest. But I think that Birmingham, the Japanese players they've brought on, they made some good signings. I think they're a club with a lot of upside. So we'll see how they do. And I think that if he helps them get to the Premier League, gets a season or two there, I think that's sort of deserved for the career he's had, and lets him tick off those last couple check boxes. So I think that when you have an attachment to these players, you're gonna debate the decisions they make and all that, but they have their own decision-making processes, and I think that you do have to respect that to a point.
Yeah, no, I hope it does do well. The last pick to yourself, Alan. What's your last final thoughts, mate, before we end the show?
No, it's been great to hear Dan's expert opinions on the matters. Obviously, he's got an insight that no other that we've got, because he's kind of seeing a lot of the league kind of week in, week out. So, yeah, I just hope that these two players I've seen the comments, we have had some kind of relative success from bringing in players for the J League, etc., or parts of Asia, but there has been ones that we'll say in the nicest way that have kind of failed quite dramatically when you look at maybe the likes of Ideguchi and Kobayashi. So it's not always successful. It's kind of low risk with maybe the transfer fees were paid, but yeah. I just want to thank Dan for coming on. So on you go, Dan. Sorry.
Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I mean, like, you sort of bringing up Ideguchi, who's somehow I always forget that Ideguchi was the third. I always think it was Maeda, Hatate, and Kobayashi, and I always forget that Ideguchi. But like, if you look at those 6 players that they brought on, I mean, now it's 8 that they brought on in this sort of current era. But if you look at the 6, you had 3 absolute hits. Iwata, who played decently, he wasn't a star, but I think he played pretty well. He accounted for himself pretty well. And Ideguchi and Kobayashi, who, injuries, things didn't work out. And that's a pretty good rate. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty good success rate. You get 4 amazing players out of 6. Or really 3 amazing players, 1 good player, and out. Like,
yeah, I think he maybe deserved a longer time at Celtic, Iwata.
Sure,
I think I think they're saying he's doing really well at Birmingham just now. I think he never really let Celtic down when he came in. I think he was always quite a reliable player. Mm-hmm. So you're definitely, even at a 50% strike rate with the transfer fees that Celtic are paying, I think that is relatively good business. And I'd probably say 3 of the players in Kyogo, Maeda and Hayate, they'll probably, Celtic fans will remember them for a long, long time in a very good way, because they've provided some kind of very important results and performances for the club, which have then led to trophies and kind of memories that most Celtic fans will remember for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. It's been brilliant to chat to Dan to get more information. As Alan says, we are not privileged to know about these guys as much as you are. So I really appreciate you coming on, Dan. I really appreciate your time. Hopefully we'll get you back on again if we do any more business or any wee chat pops up. But I hope you've enjoyed the chat, Dan, and thanks for coming on, Dan.
No, it's been great. Speaking of sort of group memories, I mean, that first year when all those when the 4 players in Ange came on, and getting to know you guys and the Celtic community, it was one of the definitely more interesting and enjoyable chapters of my career, and I will always remember it pretty fondly. And I just love the opportunity to teach you guys and your viewers and your audiences and and everyone who follows this club, that Japanese football is here and it's creating a lot of incredible players. And I think that I've met a few guys who Celtic fans who have come over to see Marinos and Frontale and all that. And hey, one thing that has definitely changed since the last time I was on here, the borders are open. Japan's breaking tourism numbers left and right. So if you want to come check out a J League game, there's never been a better opportunity. And I hope you guys will, because we have an incredible thing here, and you're going to see that hopefully in the World Cup next year, and hopefully you'll see it from the likes of Yamada and Inamura this season.
I think a lot of Celtic fans, Dan, do like to travel, so you never know. You might see a lot of Celtic fans in the future as well, if obviously all going well. So, but again, Dan, thanks for your time. If you have enjoyed the content with myself, Alan, and Dan, and you do enjoy the content on the podcast, please like and subscribe. We are on all social media platforms. You can get Dan on Blue Sky and Twitter. He is quite vocal on the two of them in terms of Japanese stuff, and I'm sure if you get any questions, he'll answer. But again, thanks for your time, guys. I hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we will see you all very, very soon. Take care.
Sets up Larsson here. Larsson. Oh, he's in! Henrik Larsson! That is sensational! O'Reilly. How about that for a pass? Jota! How about that for a finish? That is Jota for you! In for Henrik Larsson. And Moravcik! His first goal for Celtic! Here is Shunsuke Nakamura! Exquisite!